welcome to Wealth Strategies Unleashed. I'm Robert Gilliland, and with me is
Mike Alexander.
the one and only Mike Alexander. Hey, Mike. And going through and thinking about what we're going to talk about today, one of the things that's kind of occurred to me is that life is so confusing. There are so many different things going on. It is very, very, very complicated. And I thought, you know what? We've got clients that have complicated lives, complicated things going on. Well, let's talk about let's talk about strategies for how do you simplify your financial life.
You know, you're asking really probably the best question that you can ask in financial planning, right?
Well, thank you.
The first thing to do, obviously, would be establish a plan in general, right?
That's right.
I mean, it's really hard to get where you're going if you don't know where you're going.
Well, that's because you might end up there.
You might end up there.
As you're going through and you're thinking about this, right, is that having that plan in place gives you that peace of mind. Having that plan in place helps you get goals to be able to focus on, and it also says, how important is that goal, right?
Yeah, it's something that's measurable. I think the idea is it's something that you can, a lot of times they'll always tell you write things down. That's kind of what a plan does. And I think it's a lot easier for people to stick to a plan once it's kind of codified and written down for them.
Yeah, and I think that as you're going through that process, one of the things that really does give you the ability to do is to as a organization expert that we have as a client says, is declutter, right? Go and look at those things that are kind of those money traps or things that you're not really using or things you're just wasting money on. Right, whether that be subscriptions or gym memberships. That you don't use, those kind of things. What those inside there? What else?
Well, I think you talked a little bit about decluttering. A lot of times, people will think that that they are diversified in their investment portfolios by having accounts spread out all over the place. And the reality is that's not really what real diversification
right.
is. I mean, you diversify by obviously asset class and stocks and bonds and cash and alternatives and things of that nature. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have accounts all over the place. I think there's a lot of folks that have probably seen those. They used to put them in the paper all the time that would say that, like, if you left an orphaned account somewhere, and your name is listed here, that type of thing. So I think the idea of simplifying things and making it where it's much easier to manage makes you that much more effective.
Yeah, I think that is, if owning XYZ company at this investment place and owning XYZ company at this investment place is not diversifying, right? Owning the S&P 500 and the S&P 500.
You mean it can't be up at one firm and down at another?
No, it doesn't happen that way. And you know what? Besides that, that's going to make your tax season easier, make it easier for monitoring, those kind of things. I think that's true. So you start off with this plan, and then you build this plan about where you want to get to. Then you go through and you declutter. What's your thoughts on next steps inside there?
Yeah, I think we talk about this with every client, and we talk about it with every prospective client that we have, and that is, you need to make sure that you have an emergency budget set aside. So if we've said it once, we've said it 1,000 times, that it is a great place to start before you start investing for the short term, the intermediate term, the long term. Part of that planning process is making sure that you've set aside that emergency budget to cover the what if scenarios, the things that are out of your control. We read all the statistics about what percentage of the population is one paycheck away, or
the number of people who make over $100,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck.
Right, and so one of the things that you can do that that really creates, again, that peace of mind that you talk about is establishing that emergency plan. It goes part and parcel with the plan itself. And I really think it really sets up an investor for and their family. It sets them up for success going forward. The other thing that I would say, just kind of back to this whole peace of mind is, having savings and having investments and having money is really serves no real purpose beyond creating flexibility.
Right.
Flexibility to do what you want, flexibility to help the people that you want, so on and so forth. And so that's what it really creates.
Yeah, and I think in just kind of building on that is that having that actual budget and then tracking that actual budget, because there's a book I read that the key phrase is discipline equals freedom. The reality is that if you're disciplined to stick to that budget, what happens is that you have the freedom, using your phrase, flexibility to do the things that you need and want to do. And that makes all the difference. And you really do have peace of mind in knowing that I'm in good shape, I'm financially secure. If I stick to this budget, I'm going to be able to get to where I want to go. And I think in going through to do that, there's a lot of things that you can do. And I think if you can go through and automate, if you're talking about how do I make it so that it's not so complicated, I can automate an awful lot, right? You can automate credit card bills. You can automate electric bills, automatic bill pay on all of those reoccurring things, making them so they're set up so that it's just a matter of you're not having to sit down. I mean, who in the world writes checks these days? But making sure that you have that all completely set up, the automatic bill pay, and being disciplined around those transfers. I do think you got to be careful about utilizing some of these things like a Venmo or what's the Zelle and
right.
things like that, because it's just too easy to move money and you're not necessarily easy to track.
Yeah, it's Robert, you bring up this whole automation aspect of it. I mean, certainly as it relates to things like credit card bills, I think you read on a regular basis about how much money credit card companies actually make on late fees.
Right.
And, and it can be an hour late, I mean, and all of a sudden somebody's getting hit with a $35 fee or what have you. And so there's a lot of these things that could be automated. I think one thing that goes hand in hand with that is again, making sure that you're very, very careful with your information and your data. As we all know, there's lots and lots of scams and people looking to take advantage of folks out there. And so it's one of the things that you want to be very, very guarded about. And again, I think that's also one of the reasons why you don't necessarily, need to have accounts all over the place, because the more of that there is, the more likelihood that you could become one of those victims or fall prey to to somebody who's looking to take advantage.
The one thing that would kind of go not to add on that because securing your data is vitally important. Talk about making your life more complex is lose your identity and then things completely change, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that there are some things you can do to kind of embrace the efficiency. Like I know that our clients get access to our portal, which gives them the place to go through and see everything all at once. So if they have a 401k, they have an IRA, they have a bank account, we manage the IRA, the taxable savings, but their 401k's over here, they've got a checking account. Having what they call them aggregators, we have one on our website that you can go and you can pull that aggregator together and you can actually go and see what's my net worth, at any given time, and then you can kind of go through and do some planning, and clearly utilizing those tools like web bill pay, different things like that, make your life help make it so that it's more efficient. The less clutter you have, it's crazy. It seems like the older I get, I'm becoming more and more and more of a minimalist, right? And
right.
So look, I want to be this and this. I think something else you can do to simplify your financial life is go through and look and see how many types of accounts you have, right? It's amazing to me that people that'll have 15 different IRA accounts, as an example. Now, this was a lot more present a long time ago, or prevalent a long time ago, and that is they would open up an IRA at this bank, then they would open up an IRA at this bank, and then they would come back and open up another IRA here. So they end up with 7 or 8 different IRAs. Well, the reality is you can combine those IRAs. Now, you may have a strategy or a reason for having different IRAs. They may have different purposes. One may be growth. One may be for income in 6 years. One may be for income now. One may be to manage assets a different way. But to simplify your life, there's no reason to have bank IRAs, investment company A, investment company B, investment company C IRAs. get those combined. And what I found is people, as they get closer to retirement, the simpler they want things. They want one button to go and look and see where everything is.
Yeah, Robert, it's funny that you mentioned that. Back, 30 years ago when I got into the industry.
30 years?
Yeah, I know. It doesn't seem like it, right? But back in those days, the bank would be like, yeah, you need to come in and, open your IRA. And every year somebody would open an IRA. Well, in many cases they were, it's back in the day when you could buy CDs yielding 7 or 8% or whatever. And so people thought of the IRA as actually being the investment as opposed to being the vehicle for investment. And that's one of the reasons, why people would have so many of those. But kind of to your point, if that's your situation, it's certainly something that you want to make sure that you go back and review. There may be some that, maybe you have some that could be converted to a Roth. Maybe that makes sense for, a portion of these, accounts, and maybe, for the others, maybe they stay as traditional.
And I just think that making sure that you have this plan to know where you're going, it does not have to be overly complex. The strategies inside there may seem like they're complex, but that doesn't necessarily have to be. Your investment strategy doesn't have to be doing derivatives and cover call and put option and bull put spreads and everything else that's inside there, right? There are some people who really like that, but that ends up being pretty complex. Your estate plan may or may not need to be complex depending on what you're trying to accomplish, but it doesn't have to be, right? And I think that if you take the strategy of, I want things to be relatively simple because I'm going to be able to get from A to B quicker that way, then that's the approach you should take.
Yep. Yeah. One last thing that I thought about as well is I think we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but I think it always makes sense that at least on an annual basis, make sure that you kind of review your will, make sure that everything makes sense there, review your beneficiaries, make sure that makes sense as well, and just always make sure that you're taking some inventory. And I know we obviously help people with that every day, just in terms of taking that financial inventory. Again, that leads to peace of mind, and if you feel really at peace with that, I think it makes the experience a lot better.
I think just to kind of take that one step is that I think what you can do is get yourself a 3-ring binder, call it whatever your family name is, book, right? So the Gilliland family book. Inside of there doesn't have a whole bunch of sections, but inside of there is a place that lists every place that you have an account, right? Concenture Wealth Management, XYZ Bank, here's where it is, and just a little note about who to call that would be familiar with it. Once a year, inside that same book, you could have a copy of your will, you could have a copy of other important documents, copy, not the original, and all that, and that's the book that helps keep everything organized. Your financial plan goes in there, and that then helps you make your life so that, if this happens right here, I've got this, insurance policies or insurance agents, phone numbers, things like that, to be able to help make it so that you have everything in place and you know where it is. It's all in one place. Oh, okay, where are we doing? How are we doing? And you keep track of it. That way you just don't forget and say, oh yeah, I think I had an account over at,
right.
I mean, yeah, it's got $265 in it, and it's going to stay there because you forgot about it, and it's just there. Or maybe it's $26,000 and you just forgot about it. So, I agree that you got to have that plan. You got to declutter. You got to have a place. You got to review and use automate and find things to help make you more efficient.
Agreed, 100%.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, thanks again for joining us.
You bet.
Thank you to everyone for joining us. Hopefully this helps make your financial life a little less complex and everything simplifies a little bit. If there's any of these strategies, please feel free that you want to discuss further. Please feel free to reach out. Hope you all have a great time. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.